The United States today is a deeply divided country awash in weapons, leading many to worry about escalating political violence and even a broader sectarian conflict. For her series, America at a Crossroads, Judy Woodruff recently traveled to a place steeped in both political violence and the hope for peace, Northern Ireland, to find out what lessons Americans might learn from its experience.
In the lush green hills of Downpatrick in the southeast of Northern Ireland, a group of American tourists recently walked among the ancient ruins of Inch Abbey, where English monks once lived.
I rise today.
A couple of miles away, they offered a prayer at the grave of St. Patrick, the Apostle of Ireland, himself of Britain. While in the capital, Belfast, they were confronted by the far more recent history of division in the period known as the Troubles, the 30-year sectarian conflict between Catholics and Protestants that cleaved society in two.
In those days, there was gun battles every day of the week.
This group of American tourists were from First United Methodist Church of Winter Park in Florida.
I was seething with anger about the injustice of what had happened.
And they had come to learn about this conflict from the people who lived through it.
Still in my school uniform, I swore allegiance to one of the most vicious armed groups at the time.
The harm it did.
And the police know who killed my son and have done absolutely nothing about it.
And efforts to build and maintain its hard-won peace.
I'm concerned, greatly concerned about the polarization. It seems like we can't have even dialogue in a lot of ways anymore.
First United Methodist pastor David Miller said he sees parallels back home.
Our identity is becoming primary and divided. We're certainly more polarized than we've been even 5 years ago.
You see a connection.
I do see a connection, yes. Absolutely.
Similarities.
Yeah, I think why choose to come here? Well, because there are similarities. That's why we want to look through this lens, back at our own context.
And I often say, in your context in the United States, how do you create spaces to hear the other person's perspective?
Their guide was another Methodist minister and psychologist, Gary Mason. He grew up in Belfast during the Troubles and worked for decades to build peace at home before sharing those lessons with Israelis and Palestinians, Eastern Europeans, and in more recent years, Americans. He stressed that once unleashed, the kind of sectarian conflict Northern Ireland lived through was very hard to stop.
When I was a little boy in the late 60s, common wisdom of the day was, this will be over by Christmas. They were wrong. It ended up 30 years, and it was the longest operation in British military history, and was very, very difficult to bring to an end.
The long conflict between Catholics who wanted an independent, unified Ireland free of British rule and Protestants who wished to remain loyal to the United Kingdom goes back centuries, and even when the fight truly began is hotly contested. The more recent period of violence, the Troubles, began in the late 1960s, when the low, simmering conflict boiled over.
Those late 60s, early 70s, we can call it ethnic cleansing, but very, very quickly, people began to move into their own safe spaces. And by the time we reached 1972, the worst year of the conflict, we had a terrorist incident every 40 minutes.
The fighting would drag on for roughly 30 years, with tens of thousands of shootings, armed robberies, and bombings. More than 25,000 citizens locked up, and more than 3,500 killed, all in a country of about 1.6 million people. It wasn't until 1998 that the two sides, with outside help from U.S. Senator George Mitchell and the Clinton administration, brokered the political compromise known as the Good Friday Agreement.
Yes, 71.12%.
Widely approved by the northern population in a referendum. And yet, since 1998, many more walls have been built, and behind them, the trauma of the conflict has continued to play out. Here in Belfast, the so-called peace walls that separate Catholic neighborhoods from Protestant are physical reminders of the violence and division that can still be felt, decades after the signing of the Good Friday Agreement, that formally ended the conflict. Many of the people who lived through the Troubles still struggle with that history and with how to move forward together, which may hold lessons for our own country.
More than 4,000 people, Judy, since the ending of the conflict in 1998, have committed suicide because of conflict-related issues. 1 in 5 ex-prisoners are drinking themselves to death. So they're self-medicating with alcohol. We have the highest dosage here in this tiny little space of Northern Ireland of antidepressants in Western Europe. I think a key for any person in American leadership is to ensure that you never descend into political violence as we did here. The cost of that is absolutely incredible.
And this is a photograph of my primary school football team. More than half of them ended up as political prisoners.
As teenagers, William Mitchell and Jerry McConville joined opposing paramilitary groups.
So I was about 10.
This was about age 10.
About age 10, and 5 of those went to prison.
Eventually, each spending many years in prison. Despite once being sworn enemies, today they call each other friends and colleagues. And while they strongly disagree about the future of this place, whether it should remain part of the UK or unify with Ireland, they work together to build bridges between their respective communities.
If you'd asked me during my period of incarceration, tell me something you'd never do, this would be one of the things I would have said at the time. But things change. I'm okay with people pursuing a different agenda than me, as long as they do it legally and democratically.
You know, it's not popular sometimes within your own community. You know, people would say to you, you're sitting down with a loyalist, or you're sitting down with the people who murdered my brother or whatever. And likewise, I would acknowledge that on William's side. But it's about giving leadership. It's about saying this is the way to do it. This is the way forward. We need to listen and understand the other person's point of view.
Reluctantly I rise, routine tasks now dull, dreary, drudgery. You are not here.
Linda Malloy is Catholic, and she shared a poem she wrote with the American group about her son John, who in 1996 was murdered at the age of 18 as he was walking home late one night.
Welcome the night in my haven, close my eyes, look for your face, you are not here.
His killers were never apprehended. On the Shankill Road, a street synonymous with loyalty to Britain, Alan McBride's wife and father-in-law were killed in a bombing in 1993 when Catholic paramilitaries attacked their fish shop in an attempt to kill opposition forces who regularly met upstairs.
The bombers came in, left the bomb on the counter and killed 9 innocent people, including my father-in-law, my wife, and 7 other people who just happened to be shopping.
Despite their deep wounds and different backgrounds, Malloy and McBride have become close friends, working for many years together at a trauma center called WAVE to help people on both sides deal with the past.
But you've no idea really of knowing just the people you touch and the people that they in turn will touch. And I think whilst Linda and I's story is one of sadness and hardship and hurt, the fact that we can be together, we can laugh, we can joke, we can, present an image of Northern Ireland that is, look, here's somebody from 2 opposite sides of the community, but we're absolutely at one with what we want for the future.
It's just like throwing a stone into the ocean and causing the ripples, But the other part of it is remembering our loved ones as well. I do these talks and things like that so that John is not forgotten. The morning is crisp and dry. Trudge through autumn leaves, feel the crunch, register reds, golds and greens, and suddenly you are all around me.
Members of the Florida congregation were deeply moved by what they heard.
I have young children, and hearing the story of her losing her son, it's hard not to put yourself there and to think what that might be like. And for something like politics. And
For his part, Gary Mason worries about the normalization of political violence he sees today in the United States. the fire set to Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's residence, the murder of a lawmaker in Minnesota, the assassination attempts on President Trump's life last year, the mass shootings in schools and churches and public spaces that have become routine, and overall the language of dehumanization he hears from our leaders.
I was saying to both Republicans and Democrats, politics is about the healthy art of disagreement. I mean, we know that. But it's also important to understand, why did that person make those choices? And why did they do that? A theologian of another generation once said, dehumanization precedes genocide. And the last thing a great country like the United States wants to do is to continue to demonize the other person. Let's have a robust political debate, but remember where demonization leads to. So be careful would be my advice.
In a coming story, we'll profile what the U.S. might learn from the work being done in Northern Ireland today to maintain the peace and to build a more integrated future.
Northern Ireland is now doing something I think uniquely special in this world, but they had to come through hell in order to get there. Hopefully we're wise enough to learn from that example and not have to go there in the first place.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Judy Woodruff in Belfast, Northern Ireland.